H-Shem. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class, Parshat Chukat 5785. And as I say almost every year that we've been learning this Parsha, this is a jam-packed Parsha. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of events. This is, first of all, fast forwarded about 40 years, 38 years since the last Parsha. And we have the death of Moshe. We have the, not Moshe, God forbid. We have the death of Miriam and then Aaron and the complaints of the Jewish people, including their desire for water, which caused Moshe to do whatever it is that he did wrong, which is a big question amongst the commentaries. The Or HaChaim has 10 different opinions, not including his own, of what it is that Moshe did wrong at that particular juncture in that incident. And somehow he's punished, and he's not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael for it. So it must be something pretty bad. And we've dealt with that in different ways in the past. And I think today we're going to share something that you might have not seen before, and it's kind of a unique take on the whole situation. But before we get to all that, let's begin with the beginning of the parsha, which is dealing with the red heifer, which is considered a chok of the Torah. Now, chok usually is translated as a mitzvah that does not have a reason that is easily understood. But there are other opinions about what chok means, according to Rav Hirsch, and we've said this last year, especially we mentioned this. We started discussing a major essay he has on how the para aduma works, which will continue today, God willing. One of the primary things you need to know about him is that he translates chok as basically a principle, a key principle, a guiding principle of, in this case, of Torah, of Judaism, and how he fits that in with how paraduma works and why it works is just part of his genius. But before we get to that, let's look at the first words of the parsha. So the parsha begins with Vidaber Hashem el Moshe el Aaron lemor. Hashem speaks to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, "Zot chukat Torah." This is the chok. Again, depending on how you're going to translate the word chok, this is the chok of the Torah. Asher tziva Hashem lemor, that Hashem commanded to say, "Daber el bnei Yisrael," tell the Jewish people, "V'yukul para aduma." Make sure they take for themselves a red cow, tuma, it should be pure, asher ein ba mum, that does not have any blemishes, asher lo alaha ol, and that did not have a yoke placed upon it, so it never did any work. So it has to be red, it has to be pure, it has to not have any blemishes, and it has to be that it never did any work, and then that cow is burned whole, and after it's burned, its ashes are mixed with water and hyssop and some other stuff, and that's sprinkled upon somebody who has the tuma of mate, whether he or she handled a dead body, or whether they were under the tent, or under the same roof as a dead body, or part of a body, etc. All kinds of rules about this. So the person is considered tameh, and a mikveh won't clean it up. They have to be sprinkled twice in 1 week, right, on to become pure. So Rashi famously says on the parsha, one of his first comments there, Zot chukat Torah lefi shasatan v'umot ha'olam monim et Yisrael. We talked about this before. So the Jewish people will be harassed by the Satan and by the other nations of the world. Lomar ma mitzvah hazot. What is this mitzvah? Why are you doing this? Ma tam yesh ba. What kind of possible reason might it have? Lefichach katav b'chuka. That's why this particular law is called a chok, not just a chok. Zot chukat is HaTorah. This is the chok. This is like the main chok of the Torah. Gzeira hi lifanai milfanai. It is a rule for us. Ein lecha reshut laharher achareha. We don't have a right to make fun of it, to go away from it. Okay. Writes Rav Yosef Nechemia Kornitzer, the last Rav of Krakow. We've quoted him before. So he quotes this Rashi in whole, right? He says, Katuv Rashi, Israel, that the Jewish people will be harassed by the Satan and by the nations of the world, saying, what's the point of this law? Why do you do it? Chakakti chule in lecha reshut lahar ha'arecha, right? Le'inyan yifla eich yamer in lecha reshut lahar. It's a wonder, why is this the thing we're told not to go away from? Mitzinu shlomo melech alav hashalom chekar acharei tam. We're allowed to investigate after the reason. Shlomo HaMelech, we've said this in previous years, tried to understand the reason for this. The inyan para aduma, and the reason for para aduma v'chein. Rabbi Moshe Darshan gave reasons. It's not like the rule. It's not there's no reason for para aduma. Rabbi Moshe Darshan, quoted by Rashi, he gave reasons for para aduma. He gave an explanation of how it works, why it works. Adarabba mitzvah hilachor. We have a mitzvah to investigate acharei tamei mitzvot. We should try to figure out why we do what we do. We shouldn't just blindly do mitzvot. Yes, we have to do them whether we understand them or not, whether we like them or not. But to try to understand what they mean, how they affect us, how they're beneficial to our souls, to the world, yeah, you should learn that kind of thing. Ki inyan shenamar, as it says in Divrei Hayamim, da et Elokai avicha v'avaduhu. So know Hashem, your father, right? And worship him. Do what he says. It's part of doing what he says is to know him, to understand the logic behind his mitzvot. V'hine bepashtut vada hakavana b'zeh lo yeharher acharei devarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he's saying the hero here, is not that we're not supposed to investigate, try to understand Hashem. Im gam acharei hachakira lo yimtza lahem tam nachon. And if you don't find after your investigations a good reason for these mitzvot, makom makom nirali lomar bezeh al pi ma shekvar katafti sheyesh l'tmua lechora al tamo shel Moshe Rab Moshe Darshan Zal. So it's okay for us to struggle and try to figure out what the meaning is behind these mitzvot, as Moshe Darshan did. Ki ech namar shepara aduma ba lechaper al chet ha'egel. He, for example, writes, the Moshe Darshan writes, that the reason for the para aduma is to cleanse us of the sin of the golden calf. Hare kvar b'mara nitztavu al zeh. But it's kind of interesting because we were already commanded in Paraduma, according to the Gemara, we were commanded in Paraduma at Mara, which is before Har Sinai, which is before the Chet HaEgel. So it's a little bit strange that we were commanded to do it even before it became relevant, apparently. Mara nitztavu. Alze the imkain hayu mochrichin lechora laasot egel yaan kedema leze yediat Hashem Yitbarach. So with the point of being taught that at an earlier point is for us to start to understand the reasoning of Hashem. So he continues. He says, "Ah, kvar katav Rambam." Rambam writes this in his commentary on Pirkei Avot 3:15. Klal gadol b'zeh. There's a major concept in this. She'ein hayidia mikechashet habechira aval ein koach ben adam ktsar shekol hishgiach le'inyan zeh. So there's a great concept in this that even if we don't understand the entire reason before of a mitzvah, we still have to do it, right? The Alza Nemar, and this is what it says in Yeshayahu 55:8, Ki lo machshavotai machshavotechem. My reasoning isn't their reasoning. They might not understand why I do what I do. That was a cut of Rashi Zal, and Rashi their comments. Shasatan hu hayetzahara, that the Satan is the Yetzirah, the evil inclination. Umat olam monim at Yisrael, and the nations of the world will be bothering the Jewish people on this al davar tam hapara aduma, and the reasoning behind the para aduma. Ritzon olomar, what it means to say is ki bevadai nuchal lidchotam betamo shel Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. It has. They will argue on this reasoning of Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. Aval bezeh gufa heima monim et Yisrael lomar mahu tam mitzvah zu ve'ech yochal hayot kazeh shidibur shidover etchem mishpat al davar asotechem et ha'egel acharei she'akadosh baruch hu kfar yada melfanim yedia brura shetasuhu. So the big question is going to be that if Moshe Darshan is right, that the Jewish people were commanded to perform the para aduma before they did the chet ha'egel, and then Moshe Darshan said that the para aduma is in reaction to the golden calf, but the golden calf didn't happen yet. So that's what that's what the nations of the world and the Yetzirah are going to ask. What could possibly be the reason to be commanded in something for an avera that didn't happen yet? Why are you trying to be cleansed of a sin you guys didn't do? Right? That's what it means. We don't have permission to investigate after this. Lomar ki bevadei emet tamo shel Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. You can't say that this is the only reason. What Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan said, that's the only reason why we do this mitzvah. Amnam al davar hakushya shel hayeduya habechira asher Yistaef bezer tam al davar kushya zu ein lanu reshut v'koach bishalachem uktzar harher l'chakor al zeh ki. Next line, lo machshavatai machshavatechem kitirus harambam zkrona levracha. In other words, the mitzvah of the para aduma is much greater than just what it says in Moshe Darshan. You have to keep in mind that what Moshe Darshan is saying is we were commanded to do the para aduma before we did the sin that the para aduma is supposed to forgive us for. In other words, Hashem knows everything that's going to happen, and He could command in Mara before the sin, before Har Sinai. He can command us with the para aduma, and that's what we're going to justify. That's what Rashi is saying here, that the Satan and the nations are not. They're attacking this explanation of Rav Moshe Darshan. That explanation we don't have to go away from. We have an answer for that. It's not completely unthinkable answer. The answer is Hashem knows what He's doing, and Hashem can plan before the sin to have the forgiveness. Excuse me a moment. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Okay. So that's Rav Yosef Nehemiah Kornitzer explaining what it is that we're trying to defend against with our argument. Now, it's interesting also while we're on the subject of questions that are hard to answer, where it's worthwhile to share something written by of Eliyahu Dessler in Michtav Meliyahu. It's quoted in is it Talei Orot? Yeah, Talei Orot. It's from the first volume of Michtav Meliyahu, page 294. So he says there, Shamati I heard the name B'Shem Saba of Kelm, the Saba Mikelm, the altar of Kelm, right? The kol kusha shechazka he biyoter. Any question that's very difficult, the ein lateris, it doesn't have an answer. As kusha he be'atzma hatirutz. The question itself is the answer. That's what he heard. Again, try to remember this principle. If you put this on your bumper sticker, you're going to confuse all the drivers. Right? The statement says, any question that's almost impossible to answer, the question itself is the answer. Okay? So he did, the altar from Kelm did not explain this. The Saba Mikelm did not explain this, but Rav Dessler does. He has three explanations. Number one, Yesh hakasha kusha b'torat pircha she'ein aleha tshuva. You can sometimes have a really good question, and but after some pircha, after some investigation, you'll find an answer. Vein kushito ela apikursut. And really, this is not really a big question. Sorry, I'm saying this wrong. Yesh hakasha kusha b'torat pircha she'ein aleha tshuva. There are good, strong questions that don't have an answer. Ve'ein kushito ela apikursut. And sometimes that question is apikursut, is heresy. Why? Shoev hu laharod she'atorah muprachat chas v'shalom. What the person is trying to prove that that the Torah isn't correct, right? That there's faults and problems with the Torah. So that kind of question, I mean, people can ask questions without citing sources or by saying ridiculous sources, saying, well, this might be in a current manuscript of the Torah. Older manuscripts don't have that. What older manuscripts? Oh, I don't know. The theoretical ones that the Essenes have in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Those aren't legitimate Torah manuscripts. Those are written by Essenes. We don't really trust them about things like this, right? They had their own philosophy and their own ideas, and it's very possible that they put stuff into their text that was not authentically there. So that's not going to be a great question, right? So that's first of all. Second of all, v'yesh hakasha u'me'ayin motzi tirutz liyeshev. The other, this is what I was talking about before. There are questions that you can ask that once you investigate them well, zechu b'chirat Torah. That is That is what Torah is for. Sheshoev lahavin levayer. That you can ask a question, really good question, but figure it out. That's what Torah is. Trying to understand things that are complicated, making things clear. That's what Torah is. That's what it does. V'yesh asher behargisham kusha chazaka sholim la'atzmam lama lo avin. Then there are questions that a person knows that they're strong and asks, and the person asks, why can't Yudim imatora? Lama lo avin? Why don't I get it? Why don't I understand? It kind of beats himself up. V'yodim heim shaTorah amitit ela tmuhim al ezez chiyatam lahavin. And we know that Torah isn't. He knows that this person knows the Torah is amitit. It's true. It's perfect. And he can't understand why he doesn't get it. Why don't I know the answer? So he says, "Zehu asher kushito he begeder kusha al atzmo." That's what it means, according to the Saba from Kelm. That idea that the question is the answer. In other words, Kamasha Kasu Rebbe Kiva Eger Behagahotav, as Tadir he regularly writes in his writings, Lo zachite lahavin v'Hashem yair einai. So I didn't have the merit to understand it. Hashem should open my eyes. Hashem should enlighten me. In other words, the recognition that the Torah is so great, is so amazing, so powerful, I don't get it because of my own limitations. That question is the answer. In other words, that answers everything. That's how great the Torah is that it creates these kinds of big questions. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. That's what it means, this idea, al kusha shemakshim bebechina zu hu namar v'kusha atzma he hatirutz. That question, it itself is the answer. The kusha mivareret ela enyati kidevai velo aventi karui. Right. The question isn't from the Torah. The question is from me. I created that question. I don't get it. I didn't merit to know the answer to that question. That's a whole different level of understanding good questions. Let's go a little bit further on this topic of trying to understand how the para aduma works. The Chida has his own explanation. We had from Moshe Darshan, Cheta Egel, etc. But maybe there's other answers as well about how the Cheta Egel works. We saw last year, we started reading Rav Hirsch's essay that we're going to continue, God willing, in just a few moments. But this is the Chida. The Chida writes, Ma shapara tmea et hatorim hainu shapara remez l'chomer vayu ha'oskim ba tmeim. So the reason that the para aduma, that's one of the big questions about the para aduma, is why does it create tuma to the person handling it, but the person who the person handling it becomes impure, while the person getting sprinkled becomes pure? How could that possibly work? And the answer is, at least one of the answers, the Chida's answer is that the para represents chomer. It represents the physical world. Cows often represent the physical world. They are work animals, right? They're physical beings, right? And people who work with them are tmeim, right? Hora shenimshach achar hachomer yitma. So the concept here is that somebody who goes after physical things is by definition uh, taking away something from his or her own purity, right? The striving for wealth and success and these things is basically taking away from more spiritual pursuits by definition, right? Apara haya mitaher et hatmeim. So why would the para make pure those who are impure? Ora shehamniya hachomer shesurfu. This cow was burnt. Az yishar tahor v'naki ki hachomer mitame koach hasikli lefi roa mizigo umitaher koach hasikli lefi tachanto v'tov v'tov matzko. So, in other words, he's saying that this cow is getting burnt into ash, and the fire that burns is symbolic of something also. It purifies things, and especially in older, this is they knew about this a little bit more in older times. They used fire to smelt. They used fire to get rid of impurities and metals, etc. So we use fire today to get out impurities and things as well, like koshering, for instance, right? So heat has that ability to take away um, certain characteristics. V'ulai ba'avur lo yechshavu shayel la para eza segula davar etzmai l'taharam l'zehaited mitame hatahorim l'zeh chuka. The fact that it can do both at the same time. This cow, which is impure enough that the people handling it become impure, can purify somebody with its ash material, right? Like a fire. That's the whole chukah of it. That's the whole unexplainable part of it. How it can do both of these things at the same time. Um, we have in our nature, a tendency towards the physical, right? If we were, God forbid, unbound by the Torah, right, we would be almost animalistic or worse in our behavior, right? Lord of the Flies type thing, right? So the what we have in our nature is a tendency to become more physical, and without properly channeling that towards spiritual things, towards refining ourselves, towards bettering ourselves, then we will indeed sort of go more towards the cow than towards the burning symbolism of the cow. Okay, let's go a little bit further. So let's learn a little more of that essay from Rav Hirsch. He's talking about again this whole idea of the paraduma. Last class a year ago, we learned about how in this verse, chapter 19, verse 22, it says, "V'kol asher yiga bo hatame yitma." Whoever is impure and touches the impure person touches becomes impure also. Yitma hanefesh nogad titma ad ha'arev, and whoever touches the impure person was impure until the evening. So Rav Hirsch here. Let's look at our notes from last year. Good. Let's blow that up a bit so we can read it perhaps. Okay. So we read all the way up to page 427 here, where we talked about, just a quick reminder, we basically said from Rav Hirsch's perspective that tuma is all about the lack of our freedom of will to change things, right? Somebody who's dead is the furthest from being able to do anything in this world or to better him or herself in this world, right? And in comes in the mitzvah of para aduma to take away that tuma. Para aduma tmima asher ein ba mum asher lo ala ol is the physical animal aspect. This aspect is represented here by full vitality, aduma tmima. So, like Rav, just exactly like the Chidah said, that the cow represents the physical, the animal, right? The fact that it's red is it's vital, it's going, a bright red. It's alive, it's moving, right? By full vitality, by unblemished completeness, ein bamum, it doesn't have any, as we said, it doesn't have any blemishes, and by maturity, bat gimel shanim, it has to be 3 years old, it has to be a cow, it can't be a calf. According to its purpose, it is para. It is meant to be a help to man in his work, but has never used its strength in the service of man. Pasul avoda, can't have done any work yet. What is more, it has never borne the sides of service. Pasul ol, it can't have carried a yoke. It represents then physical nature not mastered by man. And in this regard, it shall be taken by the national community. Davar deber el bnei Yisrael v'yuku alecha. Talk to the Jewish people that they should take. This is the national community takes them and hand it over to the Kohen who serves in the sanctuary of the Torah. So what does this have to do with the Kohen? I'm glad you asked. The Kohen, in the name of the Torah of the sanctuary, shall show what is to be the position of physical nature uncontrolled by man. He shall show what meaning this nature is to have in the sphere of life of a human society that seeks to shape its life under the influence of the Torah. The para aduma is handed over to the Kohen, the machin, the mechunan, the one who prepares and gives direction to the life of the people towards its goal when he is clad in the bigdei kahuna, in the uniform of his office. So, in other words, all of this is symbolic. You give this cow, which represents the people without Torah, to the one who's supposed to guide the people, right? Wearing the clothes he's supposed to wear when he's guiding the people. The garments are to be bigdei lavan, white garments, like those of the Kohen Gadol in the service of Yom Kippurim. For his task is to show the way of tahara, the purity required by the Torah, in whose service he stands. Hotzi ota. This is the first lesson which he conveys by symbolic action. He takes it chutz l'shlosh machane. He takes it outside all 3 camps, outside Machane Shechina, outside Machane Levia, and even outside Machane Yisrael. For para aduma tmima asher ein ba mum, asher lo alaha ol, represents physical animal nature. We said that already. This nature is meant to serve man, not after it has withered or is broken, but in its full vitality and completeness, while it's still ready to go. And when it is not controlled by man, it no longer has a place within the framework of the Jewish national life of the people. Therefore, the Kohen who serves the Torah shall take the para aduma, asher lo Allah ol, outside the sphere of the people, where he shall prepare for it a place high up and at a distance, but opposite the entrance of the sanctuary of the Torah. So he's giving the symbolism to each one of these actions. The Hotziotah, he takes it out, it should be taken out alone. No other animal should be taken out with it, for the meaning of another animal could only be concrete, not symbolic, and would divert attention from the symbolic meaning of all these procedures. Imagine he takes out a bunch of animals, he takes out a herd. You're not even going to notice the red heifer over there. The whole point is that this red cow needs to be bright red, walking out all by itself, and everybody should see it. All right, without any diversion of attention. However, neither may 2 parot adumot be taken out together, for 2 parot would recall the idea of plurality, whereas here the objective is to represent man's uncontrolled animal nature by itself. It has to be itself. V'shachat ota, it has to be shachted. That's the second lesson which the Kohen conveys through significant action in the name of the sanctuary of the Torah, as whose servant he stands here, and to the entrance of which he looks, kineged Pesach ha'eichal, he performs the act of shchita on the para aduma, tamima asher ein ba mum asher lo Allah ol, for this animal, quote unquote, which stands here in the fullness of its vitality and completeness, and on which no yoke has ever been placed. The only remedy is shchita. You can't do anything with it, is what he's trying to symbolize. It requires total subordination through a sharp and decisive act of human free will. This is the sole intended purpose of the animal aspect, and only under this condition can and should it ascend into a hallowed relationship to God's sanctuary. Otherwise, it has no place in the human realm. What we're saying here is very deep and very important, that the whole symbolism here of this red heifer, of this red cow, is to point out that a human needs to, for the purpose of Torah, for the purpose of growth, needs to work on oneself. And leaving it to your nature, right, which is what we talked about nature quite a bit last time, how tuma is the opposite of letting nature take its course. Tuma is, the other way around. Our fighting against tuma is fighting against the forces of nature, wherein we feel sometimes that it's in our nature to do certain things. We can't control ourselves, that whole thing. This is the only shechita that is valid only if performed by a Kohen. Interestingly enough, all the other korbanot could be really shechted by anybody else. And in that, it differs essentially from all the shechitot performed at the offerings in the sanctuary. In all the korbanot offered in the sanctuary, shechita is not an avoda. It does not represent the positive value that the seeker of God's closeness must learn and accept. Rather, it represents the negative prerequisite for self-renunciation. In other words, you have to shech the animal. So you do. So it doesn't really matter who does it. Here, the shechita is the thing. You're showing that shechita is the only thing that can work here. The seeker of God's closeness must first of all renounce all selfishness and egocentric living. Only then can his life, his nefesh, be devoted to God's sanctuary and be accepted there in priest-like sanctity. Hence, the shechita is kshera bizarre, right? Even a non-Kohen can shecht this animal, because again, that's not the point. Here, however, the shechita represents the central aspect that is to be given expression. It embodies man's free mastery over the physical animal aspect of his nature. It proclaims the very opposite of the para asher lo Allah ol, and for that purpose, the para is given over to the Kohen so that he may indicate this contrast. This shechita is kshera only bekohen. Now we'll continue with other symbolism of the para aduma in God willing in future classes. But as you can see, this is a very well thought out, very long essay, and God willing, we'll get to it in the proper time. Okay. All right. Chapter 20, verse 8. This is the command that H-Shem gives to Moshe and Aaron to take the staff and to do something with the rock. We're going to find out from the Ramban that it might not be what everybody thinks it is. But meanwhile, let's go step by step here. Let's start with Rashi. Okay, let's start with the verse first. Kachatamate, take the Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron to take the staff. V'hakel et haida, to combine, gather. Sorry, that's the right word. Gather the congregation, congregate the congregation. Ata ve'Aaron achicha, you and Aaron your brother. V'dibartam, speak el hasala. That's translated as most people do. Speak to the rock, le'einehem, in front of their eyes. V'natan meimav moteta lahem mayim min hasala, and show them that you can bring water up from the rock. V'hishkita et haida et bi'iram. Then the people will be able to drink and also give to their animals. Says Rashi, for his explanation of, and this is Rashi on chapter 20, verse 12, where he gives his explanation of what it is that caused the sin. Yan lo hemantem bi. Later on, H-Shem says, because you did not cause them to believe in me. Gila katuv she'elule chet zeh bilvad hayu nichnasim la'aretz. The Torah wants to give us the explanation for the sin that caused Moshe to not go into the land. Kedei shelo yomru alehem ba'avon dor amidbar shenigzar alehem shelo yikansu. Uh, so that people don't think that the generation of this Dora Midbar, the generation of the wilderness, they is it's because of them they weren't going to go into the land. So why should Moshe be allowed to go into the land? No, that's this pasuk needs to tell us what the real reason is. Kach haya avon Moshe Aaron. So this is so you don't think that the Torah tells you what the sin was of Moshe and Aaron. Va'alo hatzon uvakar yishchat kasha mizu ela lefi shebeseter hisech alav hakatuv. The verse is coming to teach you kan shebe'amad kol Yisrael lo hisech alav hakatuv b'pnei kiddush Hashem. The real sin was that they didn't create a kiddush Hashem. Right? Somehow, by talking to the rock, they would have created a Kiddush Hashem, and that didn't happen because they hit the rock instead. Again, you shouldn't think that there's any other thing wrong with Moshe and Aaron. It's not because that generation was going to die in the desert, so might as well take the leaders with them. No. And you can't say it's because they questioned whether Hashem is going to shecht so many animals or whether they can, or for all the people who are complaining about the food. No, that's not it either. It's all because of this concept of Kiddush Hashem. Kili debatem el hasela v'hotzi. They should have spoken to the rock, and the water would have come out. V'hiti mikudesh la'enei ha'eda. That would have showed the people something, some sort of greatness. This commentaries explain that it would have focused them on their greatness. They would realize how great they are if that would have happened. But the lesson should have been that just like this rock that doesn't have ears, can't talk, doesn't have any benefit from anything. It still listens to Hashem. Kal v'chomer, on the same thing by us, even more so by us. We who have something to rely on, we have reason to listen to Hashem, so all the more so we should listen to Hashem. So that lesson was not learned by the Jewish people, according to Rashi, because, again, Moshe and Aaron did not speak to the rock. Says the Ibn Ezra, different explanation to what the sin was. And again, as I said, there are all kinds of answers to this question. Tons of answers. So the Ibn Ezra says, Yesh mekan pirushim rabim. There's a lot of explanations. Sounds familiar. Yesh b'divrei yachid ba'avur she'amar Yisrael shmoa na ha'morim. Could be that because, as the Rambam points out, it's because Moshe got angry with the people, or frustrated, and called them rebels. So that seems to be the big sin according to the Rambam. V'hem b'nei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They're not rebels. They're the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. How dare he? I'm putting words in the Rambam's mouth here. How could Moshe speak like that to the Jewish people? Let me see this. Just trying to get to the point here that I wanted to share with you. We don't have time for the whole Ibn Ezra. Um, uh, um, so so the Ibn Ezra, let me just skip to the English here at the end. It was unseemly for Moshe to say anything before fulfilling God's command. That's why Moshe was punished. He by Hashem told him to do something, and instead of doing the thing, he had he cursed out the Jewish people. It's not because he called them rebels. It's because he spoke altogether. That shouldn't happen when you have a mitzvah to do. So that's the Ibn Ezra's answer. Now the Ramban, this is the one I wanted to share with you. So the Ramban says, and this is his commentaries on chapter 20, verse 8, our pasuk, right? We spent a lot of time here on the aduma, and now we're spending quite a bit of time here on this on the sin of Moshe. This is like I said, this is going to change your understanding of the whole event. It says, "Valdati tam dibartem el hasela." In his opinion, Ramban is right. In my opinion, the whole idea of talking to the rock, kamo al hasela, means not to the rock, means about the rock. They were supposed to speak about al el regarding this rock to the Jewish people. Meaning what? V'chein ko amar Hashem el hamudim ve'al hamechonot b'chele yovo. So this is a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Again, the word el means regarding, right? Yitzhave sheomru le'ene ha'eda b'yotam nikhalim kulam shehashem yotzi lahem Maya min hasela v'chein asu. What Hashem commanded Moshe to do, Moshe and Aaron to do, that they should say in front of the people, Hashem commanded us to do this, to hit the rock, actually, in front of you. But they didn't speak. So ironically, what the Ramban is saying is the exact opposite of what Ibn Ezra said. Ibn Ezra said their problem was that they spoke to the people. Ramban says maybe they did, but they didn't say what they were supposed to say. They were supposed to say, we are about to hit the rock, and Hashem is going to make a miracle happen, that this rock that doesn't have any water in it is going to continue giving us water. He says on this, by the way, Al Yiksha, don't ask. Al Yiksha Alecha Dibartem El Hasela Le'inehem. Don't be worried about the words, speak to the rock before their eyes. Shishmu ki tamu kamo lifnehem shishmu kulam. For the meaning of the word lifnehem, in front of them, is like the expression before them. So they should hear it. And the Hananya said in front of the eyes of all the people. Eyes don't hear things. So Hananya speaking in front of the eyes means so that everybody can hear him. Right? Ko amar Hashem kachi yishbor et ol melech Bavel, etc. V'chein rabim, and there's a lot of other examples like this. Otam leinehem v'kan. So just because the verse says it's in front of their eyes doesn't mean they have to see anything. You can speak in front of somebody's eyes also. Ramban says that there's a number of sources for this, but this is Ramban's understanding of the sin, had nothing to do with the fact that they hit the rock. That's, by the way, that's earth-shattering, because almost everybody says, as we've seen, almost everybody says that there's something wrong with this action of them hitting the rock. Ramban says they didn't. They did hit the rock, but that wasn't the problem. They were supposed to hit the rock. They weren't supposed to talk to it. They're supposed to talk about it, and that's a whole different understanding of this thing. Okay, we have just a couple more pieces here. Yeah, let's try to get to this quick. Um, Later on, the Jewish people complain after Aaron dies and the clouds of glory go away. So then they are attacked by the wildlife that lives in the midbar, including snakes, particularly snakes, and the snakes are poisonous. And Hashem said, and it says chapter 21, verse 6, V'yishalach Hashem ba'am et hanechashim of hasrafim, the seraphim snakes. Seraphim are usually fire related, right? Fire-breathing snakes, right, if you will. V'yinashku et ha'am v'yamat am rav misrael. Many people died from these bites. The rokeach, and we brought in this rokeach a few years ago as well, but it's just an important piece. It's very well known. Why snakes in particular? Lefi shehotziu shemra al boram, because the Jewish people were complaining. They were saying lashon hara about something that was created for them. Kamo hanachash, just like the Nachash in the Garden of Eden story. Shamar ki yodei Elokim, where he says Hashem knows that you're going to be just like him. That's how he convinced Chava to eat the fruit. Nachash afar v'chamo. The Nachash was punished with having to eat. Afar lachmo is supposed to eat afar dust, right? V'lahem natan dagan hashemayim mitoch l'chichan amru nafshenu katza b'lechem hakalka. And you complain about you're not eating dust, you're eating heavenly bread, right? And you're complaining about that, and therefore that's why they were attacked by these snakes, and they didn't have the protection of the clouds of glory. And so, because they were attacked, Moshe was commanded by Hashem to put up these snakes on a pole, a high pole, where the Jewish people had to look up, according to the Mishnah. And by looking up, they would remember that Hashem, who's above them, is controlling the events of the world, and that they should behave themselves. V'yas Moshe nachash nechoshet. It was Moshe's chiddush to make it copper nechoshet. V'yisimehu alanes, put it on top of this pole. V'ya im nashach nachash. If a snake bit a person, he beat el nachash and nechoshet v'chai. You look at this copper snake and live. Rabbeinu Bachai, in his commentary, he has a pretty long commentary explaining every single piece, little by little, of this entire event. But I just want to get to the end here where he talks about why this medicine worked. So he says, Hafach HaTeva, nature was switched around. Ki hanashuch mistaken b'habitu al tzurat hanochash. By looking at the snake, they got better. V'yasu Moshe min achoshet klal shehu ma'adim dugmat hanachashim hasrafim, because they were bit by snakes. They should look at a snake, but that's not natural. That's actually anti-intuitive, right? Because v'chein yitrape Chizkiyahu b'mrichad devalat tanim al hashchin. Let's go on. There's other times when the thing itself was used to cure the ailment, but here it says v'chein hiskiru chachmei harofim misfrehem. So the great doctors of his time, it's talking about the 11, 1200s, the great doctors then, and they wrote in their books, Virazal and the rabbi, he screws them Mesechet Yom HaPerek, Yom HaKippurim, and it says in Mesechet Yoma a similar thing. Ki kol nachush mikelev, anybody bitten by a dog, kol terisar yirchei shata lo shtei maya ele begufta the nechasha. So somebody who's bitten by a dog and is then bothered by water. It's an illness called hydrophobia. Is scared of water because if he sees a dog in the reflection of the water, he might die. Dilma chazi le kalba mistakan. Right. So if he sees a dog, he'll die. V'chein harofim yizhiru mish yizkir mipnei hanachoshim sham hanachush. So that's why it's a little strange that although you can't even hear the word dog, right? If they've been bitten by a dog. Here, they're looking at a snake to be cured of snake bites. This is the opposite of how nature works, right? Kinavshem dafka b'machshava shehi lo tefared mimenu ad sheyapilu be Shatan shalahem uru demut gore kalavim. Kevan she'inyan zeh emet v'yatziv. It's true and it's been tested. Shenefalod chachmat hatolda hayaraze Yisrael neshuche hanechashem misrafim el iru nachash shelo yiskiruhu. So why did all of this happen? Look at the last lines. Lahodia ki kain hanachash meimit elech hachet. It's not the snake that kills; it's the sin that kills. Right? People don't die from a snake bite. People die from a snake bite if Hashem wants them to die from a snake bite because they deserved it because of some other behavior. Usually. Kimosha amru ein arur meimit elech hachet. It's not poison that kills. It's the sin that kills, as it says in the Gemara in Brachot. Okay, last piece for today. We're a little bit over time. I apologize. What else is new, right? But I think this is a piece that you're going to appreciate. This is from the Chatam Sofer. There's a whole strange poem that's read towards the end of the parsha, the Song of the Well. Az yashir Yisrael et hashira hazot alei be'er anu la. The Jewish people saying, "Spring up a well, sing to it." Right? Be'er chafruha sarim karuha nedive ha'am b'mchokek o mishonotam b'midbar matana. It says the well which the princes dug, which the nobles of the people started with their weapons and staffs from Midbar to Matana, Matana Nachliel, Nachliel Bamot, from this place to that place, Bamot Hagya Asher Bizdei Moav, Rosh Piska, Nishkafa Al Pnei Haishimon. So from all these different places, from Bamot and going to Pisca to going to the wastelands. Okay. Sorry, give me 1 sec. All right, good. So the Chatam Sofer in Torah Moshe, he wants to explain what this means. He says, Be'er chafrucha sarim karua nedive am b'mechokek mashanotam. The word chafruha, which we're translating as dug, right? The princess dug this well, is also a word that means shame. Begemora, right? Dashinan kol hakare al haTorah sheyesh lefarish od beTorah inyan yisachar zvulun. So the reason why that it's used that way is because he says in the Gemara it says that when we accepted the Torah, we have this concept of a Yisachar and a Zvulun. a worker who earns money to support the learner who's going to learn Torah and doesn't have time to earn money. So this concept could have been, should have been adopted by the non-Jews as well, because the non-Jews were also offered Torah. And they said no. But if they would have said yes, right? Hayinu loma Torah machzikim Torah and its strengtheners, if the Torah would have been accepted by the non-Jews, then all of the Jews would be able to learn Torah, and they would be supported by the rest of the world. Everybody would be benefited from the Torah that was being learned that way. But since the non-Jews did not accept the Torah, there's a famous midrash where Hashem offered the Torah to all the nations, and for various reasons they said no. Right? We have to take on both of those strengths, both of those abilities. Half of us work, half of us learn, or whatever the numbers are. I'm saying half, just I'm not. I didn't take a poll. All right. Chafru lashon biyush chafra. That's why they use the word chafra, which is the word for dug. They dug the well, but also they're ashamed by the well. Their behavior shames them. The shamar be'er haTorah, the Torah, the well of Torah. Shahafrucha b'shavuha b'umot ha'olam lekach krua nidivei ha'am. In other words, they could also be the supporters of Torah. They could be supporting us to learn, but instead they've decided not to accept the Torah. And by doing that, they've given us both of those responsibilities, and they have been left with almost no responsibilities. And that's a shame. That's their loss, and it's a loss to the rest of the world as well. But again, what that means for us is we need to keep in mind that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to the world to learn Torah, to grow from Torah, and to help the rest of the world grow from Torah as well. And thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your week. If you're about to light Shabbat candles, do that and have a great Shabbat Shalom as well. Take care.